Greetings everyone. Thank you very much for being a part of this webinar. I would also like to express my sincerest gratitude to Mr. Eston McKeague, the President of the Young World Federalists, and the rest of the organization, without whom this event would not have been possible. From aiding the research process to arranging the technical prerequisites and designing the official posters, the Young World Federalists have immensely contributed to this initiative. Hence, I seek to thank them heartily on behalf of all the GFL members. Now, I would be sharing a presentation on the history of the idea of world federalism and the inception and momentum gaining period of the movement. So let's begin. I would like to start by reciting an extract from the poem Locksley Hall, authored by the English poet Alfred Tennyson. For I dipped into the future, far as human eye could see, saw the vision of the world and the wonder that would be, saw the heavens fill with commerce, argosies of magic sails, pilots of the purple twilight, dropping down with costly bales, heard the heavens fill with shouting, and there rained a ghastly dew from the nation's airy navies, grappling in the central blue, far along the worldwide whisper of the south wind rushing warm, with the standards of the peoples plunging through the thunderstorm, till the war drum throbbed no longer, and the battle flags were furled. In the Parliament of Man, the Federation of the World, there the common sense of most shall hold a fretful dream in awe, and the kindly earth shall slumber, lapped in universal law. Beautiful lines indeed. They capture the essence of the vision of world federalism. This poem was written in 1835 and published in 1842 and reflected the optimism of the Victorian age. Tennyson had travelled by the first train from Liverpool to Manchester in 1830. The poem's narrator, disappointed in love, finds consolation in thinking about progress and the future achievements of mankind. In 1951, in an interview with the New Yorker journalist John Hershey, US President Harry Truman revealed that he had carried the lines cited above in his wallet for 50 years and commented, "I guess that's what I have been really working for ever since I first put that poetry in my pocket." So coming to the main question, what is world federalism? What is the idea all about? World federalism advocates the formation of an additional global layer of governance which would address issues of international importance. It seeks to spread pacifism and equality through economic integration, systematic disarmament, elimination of expansionism and polarization, and so on. We campaign for a systemic change in governance rather than a political one. Hence, the movement has supporters across the political spectrum. We have supporters from the left, we have supporters from the right, we have socialists, we have conservatives, we have liberals. And every human being can relate to the cause in some way or the other. The reason being that most of our present day problems are due to the absence of a globalized form of governance. There's not a singular government at the center which can manage things like climate change and unfair economic practices and the current pandemic we all are undergoing, the COVID-19 pandemic. So that's the reason why every human being can relate to this cause. World federalism is distinguished from unitary world government models by the principle of subsidiarity, by which decisions are made at the most local level, that is, effective, thus preserving national agency to a large degree. Proponents maintain that World Federation offers a more effective and accountable global governance structure rather than the existing United Nations organization, while simultaneously allowing wide autonomy for national, regional, and local governments. Hence, in my opinion, a good way to put it would be to say that world federalism, instead of crumbling the sovereignty of nations, would rather enhance the independence and influence of each nation and treat them in a just manner. From a tiny, neglected African nation to the prosperous gargantuan countries of North America and Asia, all would be receiving equal decision-making authority and representation globally. Although world federalism etymologically implies an earth-based organization, most proponents agree that the concept would expand to include all of humanity in the event that it becomes an interplanetary civilization. So this is something agreeably far-fetched, and you might have come across a lot of these things in science fiction and so on. But the way technology is currently progressing, the possibility of a groundbreaking discovery in this regard cannot be ruled out. Hence, the proponents of world federalism, they feel it's important to lay a plan of action and a philosophy ahead of time. Famous advocates of world federalism include Albert Einstein, Mahatma Gandhi, Martin Luther King Jr., Peter Ustinov, Rosika Schwimmer, Albert Camus, Winston Churchill, Gary Davis, Emery Reeves, Wendell Willkie, Jawaharlal Nehru, E.B. White, and Lola Maverick Lloyd. Now that we all have a basic idea about world federalism, I believe we are ready to know a bit more about the history of the idea. So, how old is exactly the idea of world federal government, and where exactly did world federalism originate? So, world federalism has basically evolved from the more general proposals of a world government. Proposals for a world government can be found as far back as ancient Greece, India, and China, mostly tied to a mystical cosmology. So, perhaps the most popular instance of a world government, some person wanting a world government, would be Alexander and his conquest to conquer the world. But of course, that's not something we exactly relate to, because that was an autocratic way of rule which Alexander was intending to spread, while we are all Democrats and we exactly want to conserve liberty, equality, and fraternity in its best form. So that's basically what the GFL and I believe most of the World Federalist organizations believe. But that can be said as one of the earliest origins of world government in human thought. Then we can come to the Sanskrit verse Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, which was inscribed in the ancient Vedic scripture, the Maha Upanishad, and it encapsulates the basic idea of a world federation and can be called one of the earliest mentions of the idea. Around 500 BCE, the Chinese philosopher Confucius offered a guiding vision of the great unity, in which the world is shared fairly and harmoniously between all people. The same vision guides the world federalists today. Similarly, around 350 BCE, when the Greek philosopher Diogenes was asked where he came from, he responded, "I am a citizen of the world." This is a very popular quote. I believe you must have heard of it. The Western history of world federalism and cosmopolitanism is often traced back to this quote. So, this is basically where the idea of world government initially started. Now, let's go a bit deep into where did exactly world federalism come as an idea. Because there's a difference between world federalism and world government, as we put it in the previous slides. World government can either be unitary or federalist, but world federalism is completely federalist and is quite representative. So let's observe this and let's explore this in the next slide. Okay, so world governments in various forms have appeared in the works of writers such as Dante Alighieri, Immanuel Kant, Anarchist Klutz, and Johann Gottlieb Fichte, where it was explicitly proposed as a means of securing world peace. A world parliament as integral part of a world republic was mentioned first by Pecker in 1842. The idea has been popularized by a number of prominent authors such as Alfred Tennyson and H.G. Wells. With the release of the book Union Now, Clarence Strait proposed a political union of democratic nations. The ancient ideas of human unity and global citizenship carried forward into the modern era, particularly in response to the development of nationalism and nation states. In 1795, the German philosopher Immanuel Kant crafted definitive articles for perpetual peace, including that the law of nations shall be founded on a federation of free states. So, this is basically where we can say world federalism as an idea in itself. It appeared in literature, it appeared in philosophy, it appeared in political thought. So this is basically where we can say the idea of world federalism dates back to this time of the history, and to these philosophers we can attribute that they were one of the first people to mention world federalism as a separate thought. Now, we have discussed about the idea of world federalism. We need to now discuss the inception of the movement. World federalism as an idea, as a thought, we have discussed that. How exactly did the movement begin? When did it exactly start? And how did it go forward? What's the impact of the movement on, what's the relevance of the movement in our current world? So let's have a look at that. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the concepts of human unity were swept up in rise of new ideologies like socialism and communism. Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels ended the Communist Manifesto with the line, "Workers of the world unite," thus inspiring several attempts to create a global coalition of workers to unite the world with socialism. In response to the outbreak of the First World War, international socialists gathered in Zimmerwald, Switzerland, and propagated the thought that working people everywhere should launch a simultaneous and effective struggle for peace in every country. After the war, the League of Nations was founded, and its inability to address the underlying causes leading to the Second World War prompted the creation of the first purely world federalist political organization in 1937 by two famous feminists, pacifists, and female suffragists, Rosika Schwimmer and Lola Maverick Lloyd. So, until now, things were highly ideology driven, and world federalism generally didn't exist as a separate thought. It was, as we saw, it was basically discussed as an idea like a world federal government is possible in some time in the future and how things would be. So, people until now they were considering that hypothesis, and if people, there was a different school of thought which associated it with some or the other political ideology like socialism or communism. So, independently, world federalism for the first time it got recognition as a movement thanks to the efforts of Mrs. Schwimmer and Mrs. Lloyd. Despite their efforts to bring the world together, the Second World War broke out just 2 years later. During World War II, anti-fascist resistance movements circulated copies of Altiero Spinelli's plan for European Federation and Global Federation. Spinelli later became one of the founding fathers of the European Union. So basically all world federal movements, they look up to the European Union and they give the European Union as a good example of continental federalism or international federalism. So most of us, we believe that the world should emulate this and we must have a global union similar to the European Union. They emerged out of war and utter destitution. They set aside all their historical rivalries. And today they are one of the most prosperous continents, prosperous regions in the world. So yes, that's something all of us believe that the world must emulate. In 1945, the Committee to Frame a World Constitution convened at the University of Chicago and drafted a constitution for the world. In August 1947, in Montreux, that is more than 51 organizations from 24 countries came together at the Conference of the World Movement for World Federal Government. The conference concluded with the Montreux Declaration. By its second Congress in 1948 in Luxembourg, the movement consisted of 1,500 members. Apologies, it consisted of 150,000 members of 19 nationalities and 50 member and affiliated organizations. The 350 participants in the Congress laid the groundwork for an association of parliamentarians for world government, which came into being in 1951. The Montreux Declaration provided the movement a much needed impetus. After the war and the use of nuclear weapons, interest in world federalism was at an all-time high. The movement grew to over 50 organizations and gained support from prominent politicians and intellectuals like Albert Einstein. In 1947, the Committee to Frame a World Constitution convened at the University of Chicago and drafted a constitution for the world. And later that year, the preliminary draft of a world constitution was completed. So it can be observed that the world federal movement, it's not something during these war years and post that, it's not something which is really discussed in school textbooks and classrooms and so on. most of the people, they don't know about the relevance and high gravity of this particular movement. So it can be concluded that this movement, this idea has been existent during the war years, and some of the movements, they have been highly successful. So there are many successful movements, many inspirational ones. So among all the numerous successful movements and inspiring examples, I would like to especially discuss Gary Davis and the World Service Authority. So let's move on to the next slide and let's see. Okay, a former World War II bomber pilot, he stormed into one of the first meetings of the United Nations General Assembly an year after the Montreux Declaration and shouted to the delegates, "We, the people, want the peace which only a world government can give. And the sovereign states you represent divide us and lead us to the abyss of total war." Gary Davis went on to establish the World Service Authority in 1953, an organization that to this day issues unofficial fantasy world passports, registers customers as world citizens, and sells world citizen identity documents such as fantasy birth certificates and identity cards, marriage certificates, political asylum cards, international exit visas, and international resident permits, and promotes the idea of global citizenship. The WSA has also allegedly sold world government postal stamps, which, according to Gary Davis, helped to convey thousands of letters between China and Taiwan in the early 1980s. So, this is something, in my opinion, which is really inspiring. A person who fought for his country with pride and valor, who saw the dreadful end of the war, he resolved to put an end to the madness and safeguard the future of the succeeding generations. Now, these documents, whatever he is issuing, they might not have any legal validity. They might not be really influential in the reality, and they might not be really like utilitarian. But again, he is introducing a sort of global citizenship, like devotion among people towards the world, towards the earth, towards the planet, towards humanity. This is what is highly inspiring for all world federalists. Mr. Davis, he knew that it's a long struggle, and it is indeed a long struggle. The World Service Authority, it's still running, and they know it's a long struggle, just like all the other world federalist organizations. But they are contributing to the movement in their own way. This is what is the dedication, this is what is the determination a person needs to have to improve his future, her future, or their future, the future of their neighbors, the future of their the future of their children, the future of their friends, the future of their families, the future of their future generations. This is what is exactly required. Hence, in my opinion, David and his initiative are one of the most inspiring examples for all the world federalists. Now, I would like to conclude this webinar with my opinion. As a person who is still studying and trying to absorb the historical relevance of this idea, I would rather say the idea of world federalism is not a utopian academic hypothesis as many believe it is. History has established the gravity of the movement in determining the present situation of global politics. Basically, we have discussed the history of the movement in brief, and there were a lot of other movements. Like you had many federal unions coming up in the US, the UK, Germany, and other parts of Europe. Then we had a lot of documents being drafted, a lot of memorandums being drafted, and a lot of movements, they were successful to a large extent. So even during the Cold War, the World Federalist movements, they were very active and they achieved a lot of popularity. People were thinking about a world government. So, my opinion, the World Federalist movement, it has been historically very important to our current geopolitical dynamics. World federalism in the present, it is sort of confined to mostly academic institutions, unlike the post-war days when we were very close to succeeding in our vision. People at a time thought of climate change as a hypothesis. This is just an example I'm giving. to those who still believe that world federalism is not possible and it's something highly far-fetched. People at a time they thought of climate change as a hypothesis, as something originating from science fiction comics. The sad part is some people still think that, so that's a different thing. But let's acknowledge, let's accept the fact that climate change is real and it is hampering our lives. Similarly, in my opinion, a world federation is inevitable. The decision is upon us whether we want it now or after another war, which most of us likely won't survive. The entire idea of having a world level governance institution, it's going to be relevant someday or the other, if not now. We need to decide when do we exactly reach that place? When do we exactly reach that time in history when humanity decides to have a world government? Viewers, the current world we are living in, it's surrounded by a lot of crises. We are having climate change on one hand, we're having global warming, we're having all sorts of environmental degradation. Then we're having a pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, which has disrupted our lives. The way things are running currently, the high levels of jingoism and hatred, we all need to think and rethink. Is this the way the world should function? If not now, then when? Hence, I would like to end on the note that we need to critically think about this idea. We need to critically analyze the idea of a world federation. I would request all of you to go through academic reports and documents, the world constitutions which have been drafted, going through YouTube videos. I would recommend going through the websites of Young World Federalists and another organization called One World, which is primarily based in Palestine and Israel. So they've given a very comprehensive background and like they've given a lot of information in this regard. So go through them and then question yourself: do you think we would be able to exist, set aside exist in prosperity, if we continue with the current form of governance? This is anarchy. I openly say this form of functioning of countries and all. This is anarchy because there's nobody to manage things at a global level. And hence, we need to recover from this anarchy. So, on that note, I would like to thank you all very much for being a patient audience. I would like to end on this note. May the world unite into a resplendent tapestry of harmonious cultures. May the centuries of war and animosity end. May the world unite into a federation.
Hello, thank you very much. Thank you to Omkaar for giving us the background of World Federalism and the history of the World Federalist movement, Federalism as an organization. So we believe that we need to build support for World Federalism. So as Omkaar was explaining, World Federalism is quite a niche and academic issue. I know that Omkaar had a small thing that he wanted to end his presentation with that basically said that World Federalism needs to not be such an academic belief anymore. It needs to be brought into the public sphere, and more people around the world need to know about it and support it. And so that's what we try to do at the Young World Federalists, is build like public or mass support for World Federalism. And to do that, we educate the public and we raise awareness, and we collaborate with like-minded organizations and mobilize activists and volunteers. Okay, so kind of carrying forward from Omkar's presentation about World Federalism in the past, I was just going to overview a little bit of what World Federalism looks like in the present. And so the main organization that is the umbrella for all World Federalists is the World Federalist Movement Institute for Global Policy. And this organization was actually founded in 1947, and it still exists to this day. And then there's another one called Democracy Without Borders that's based in Germany. And I'll talk more about them in the next slide, but they do the campaign for United Nations Parliamentary Assembly, as well as the campaign for a World Citizens Initiative. And then we have Citizens for Global Solutions, which is also very old, founded in 1947, I believe. And they're mostly in the United States, and they have chapters around the United States. And then we have Democracy Global. They're in Argentina. They are very invested in the campaign for a Latin American criminal court. I forget the proper name. It's called the Coppola campaign. Hold on, I'm going to remove this. Remove that person. They came in with Omkar's name. That's a trick. That's a good trick. Okay. Oh, sorry. I skipped. Okay. So then, yeah, Democracy Global. The next is the Earth Constitution Institute. This organization came out of the World Constitution and Parliament Association, which still exists. They actually wrote an Earth Constitution over the last like 50 years, and they have a very concrete vision for what the World Federation should look like. It's on their website. You can find it. I believe it's earthfederation.org or something like that. And they have a very fleshed out and, yeah, like I said, concrete vision, all the different organs or bodies or institutions that a World Federation would have. And they seek to gain support for their Earth Constitution that was finalized in 1991. And each one of these organizations sort of has their own pathway that they advocate for World Federation. Some are more neutral and others are much more firm or consistent in what they believe. And then there's the World Service Authority. That's their yellow logo in the bottom right. They're the ones started by Gary Davis that published the world passports. And there are, of course, others. The World Federalist Movement has organizations in Canada and Japan. There's the World Citizens Association, which has a chapter in Australia and I think in Switzerland, and there was one in Germany. So there's actually many other organizations that advocate world federalism and global democracy that are not on this slide. These are just like some of the easy ones that I know. The Young World Federalists is partnered with several of these. We work with Democracy Without Borders and Democracy Global and Citizens for pretty much all of these organizations. We work with them all the time, and we hold. I'm in meetings with these organizations frequently. Yeah, and I'll talk more about the Democracy Without Borders now. So Democracy Without Borders it started for the campaign for a democratic UN, I believe, in the 1990s, and then they became Democracy Without Borders in 2007. And they're responsible for the campaign for United Nations Parliamentary Assembly. That's the logo there, and that is the flag for the UNPA there in the middle. The campaign for the UNPA is one of the most established campaigns in world federalism. They have over 1,700, so 1,700 members of parliament that support their campaign. The UNPA would be established by the United Nations General Assembly, which represents the governments or the member states of the UN, and would start out as an advisory body. So it would advise the General Assembly and the Security Council, but represent the people as a whole, and then through time could become a world parliament that would have like democratic elections for representation in global affairs. And they have a really nice website that explains all this in detail, campaign for a UNPA. The other one there is the campaign for a UN World Citizens Initiative. This is more related to direct democracy or referendums. So this would be basically a petition from, I think it requires like a million people or something to sign. And then it would basically be a petition from the people of Earth, from humanity to the UN, based around certain issues. And so what the campaign tries to do is to make this mechanism a reality. So in the future, there could be a World Citizens Initiative, let's say on climate change or the climate crisis, that would basically say to the UN and to national governments, you know, the people, the world citizens demand that you act on climate change, and here's the petition that says that. So there's a lot of news here. Both of these campaigns have recently gotten recognition from the UN General Secretary. So these campaigns are really moving forward, and you can sign up to both of them and support both of them on their websites, at which you can find the information on the YWF website if you're curious. Yeah, so that's a little bit there. The World Federalist movement, as I mentioned, is sort of the umbrella organization for all World Federalists. It was very instrumental in the campaign for the International Criminal Court, or the Coalition for an International Criminal Court. It has since gone through a massive reorganization. It's currently designing a new strategy for the future. Young World Federalists, along with several other World Federalist organizations, have tried to put a common agenda together for the World Federalist movement. What direction should this organization take, and what direction should World Federalism as a movement take in the future? So the Young World Federalists believe that it should be more focused on growing mass support, like is our vision and mission, is taking World Federalism out of academia and into the streets, so to speak, getting more public involvement. And so the way that we do this is creating an integrated movement for World Federalism. So as you've noticed, there's lots of different logos and lots of different organizations. And so the movement itself is very splintered and separated. And so what we need is an integrated movement where we all work together and have a common agenda of building support for World Federalism. And so that's why I'm so pleased to be doing this event with the Global Federal League, is because these sort of joint events and cooperation are actually the future of World Federalism. And if we can have more events like this, not just with our organizations, but with all the organizations, then I think we'll be a stronger movement. It's sort of the short way to think about it is uniting the World Federalists to unite the world, basically. And there's some other points here, new coalitions and movement building, emphasis on youth. So I'll talk a little bit about that. The World Federalists as a movement are quite old. There was not a lot of interest in World Federalism during the Cold War. So that resulted in a lot of older World Federalists who have been carrying this idea forward for the last several decades, and not a lot of new people coming in. However, as you know, very recently, with the Young World Federalists and now with the Global Federal League, there is an increased amount of young people, very young, who are interested in this idea. And so there needs to be an emphasis on engaging the youth and also youth leadership. So I'm really proud of Omkaar for starting the Global Federal League, and I believe that this sort of initiatives by the youth are critical to the future of World Federalism, and the movement as a whole should do everything they can to support the youth in leading the future of World Federalism. And I'll just move on from there. There'll be more information. This is a slow moving process. The World Federalist movement is having a Congress in July, and there should be a lot more concrete plans for the future after that Congress. So this is all kind of up in the air. It's still being, the conversations are ongoing right now. Okay, so a little bit more about the Young World Federalists. So this is just about our organization. So this is sort of our strategy. I won't read all of this. I think I've been talking a lot, and I don't want to focus too much on just us. This is the presentation about the movement as a whole. But this is our strategy. So we need to grow and we need to act. Growth is really easy, or it's a very simple idea, more members, more organizers, more volunteers, and all around the world. So we really seek to be a global movement. We have and so we need to be welcoming and inclusive for all different types of people. This requires a high degree of cultural sensitivity and a welcoming environment. And this is an ongoing process. You're never done being welcoming and inclusive. We are always learning how to be better at this. Action is increasing pathways of action. So on our website, we have our campaigns. So they're the same names as those principles before, save Earth, abolish war, go beyond, make Earth democratic, I think that's all of them. Protect humanity, yeah. So you can take action for each of these campaigns. We also have a brochure and a flyer that will be up there, so you can print materials and you can distribute materials, and you can help be a volunteer for us. I'll talk more about that later. So there's lots of ways to get involved without being a paid member of our organization. And then I'll just continue. This is pretty obvious, increase attention, get more in the press, more in the news, more online events like this, paying for ads, and then raising money. So we have a store and we try to get donors. We are an all volunteer organization, but there's still a cost to what we do. Like I said, printing materials, paying for Zoom, hosting our website. These are all sort of the costs that we need help with, which is why we have a paid membership option. So if you're interested in helping us with these costs and becoming more involved, leading this organization, then I'd encourage you to become a member. So this is how you can actually get involved. You can go to our website, like I said, ywf.world. We have a very active community on Discord and on Reddit, over 900 people on Discord and over 6,000 on Reddit now. And you can become a member or volunteer. And we actually just recently launched our volunteer opportunities. We kind of did some restructuring, and now we have teams of volunteers. And I'll just quickly overview them. So we have a social media team, a design team, a writing team. They all do what their name is. It's pretty obvious what they each do. And then we also have a website, a fundraising, a history team. Our history team did a great job. A lot of what Omkaar was talking about came directly from the history team, and their great work in collecting resources and writing history. And then the last ones are membership and events. These are probably the most important teams that we have. So recruiting new people, onboarding people, events. Just like this one, we need more volunteers to help organize these events, run these events. So we're really eager, and you don't have to pay anything. There's no fee. There's just an application that should be linked in the description of this video when it's published, and then you can become a volunteer for Young World Federalists, and we'll have an interview with you and give you a more in-depth introduction into the strategy, and make sure that you're included and get what you want out of your time volunteering. So this is the last slide again. Overviewing, please check out the website for more information. And thank you so much. Thank you so much for listening. So that's the end of my presentation. I'll stop my screen sharing. And I guess I wanted to have a little bit of opportunity for people to ask questions from me or from Omkaar if they do. Or if there's anything that you'd like to say, Omkaar, in response to my presentation.
Yes, I would like to thank Mr. McKeague once again for all his time and managing the event so efficiently. And I would like to apologize for the network error I was facing. So India is it's surrendering to telecom monopoly. So that's a thing which is very common right now. So yes, I would be uploading my presentation later on. I would be recording it myself, and we would be having it later on YouTube. So that's not a problem. I would like to thank Mr. McKeague once again for the beautiful presentation, and I would request all of you to consider applying for becoming a volunteer and going through his website. They have given some really insightful articles and their videos and so on over there. And basically my research, it's based on their website and Wikipedia pages, and another website called One World, which is another organization basically based in Israel and Palestine. So yes, you can go through those sources to know more about us. And on that note, I would like to request everyone to spread the word to your friends, relatives, and family members. Let them know about World Federalism. Let the idea spread. Let people know there's something called World Federalism. It exists, and that would be a great help from your side. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much.
Sir, I have a query. If you could please entertain Mr. McKeague.
Mm-hmm.
Sir, recently when I tried to make my mother understand about, am I audible, sir? So I was trying to make my mother understand about this world federalism, what is it about and everything. Now, what the main thing which happened is that she said that it's impossible. Now, how can we, being a world federalist and being under this, going towards through this movement, can make people with this mindset, make them understand that it can be done, like something like this can happen in this world? If you could please give it a little bit of insight regarding this.
Yeah, of course. So there's lots of different ways to answer that question. We get that question a lot. It really depends on the person that you're talking to, how you the best way to answer that question. And also there's lots of different pathways to world federalism. Like the United Nations Parliamentary Assembly I spoke about before has a very clear set of things that need to happen, you know, a group of friends, basically a group of countries in the United Nations General Assembly need to put that on the agenda, and it gets very technical, having to do with the United Nations Charter and things like that. It's not exactly the easiest way for people to comprehend the idea, and so that's why I really focus on building mass support. And so then it starts to look more like many other mass movements, and how they were successful. So obviously the most cited examples of mass movements that achieve the impossible, so to speak, are, you know, the movement for civil rights in the United States, and Indian independence in India with Gandhi, and women's suffrage around the world. So all of these things that were thought of as impossible became reality through mass movements and mass support. And so from that standpoint, what world federalism really needs to be successful is committed groups of volunteers who are willing to organize events and bring people together, and put pressure on national governments to act. Because right now the idea is so obscure and unknown that it's very easy to say, no, that'll never happen. You don't know what you're talking about. But what we need to do is get more attention. And so that's sort of one way to do it. Another, and I'll try to keep it short, but another way that I like to think about it is connecting it to the issues that people care about. So this is sort of what I was talking about with connecting world federalism to the issues. So many people care about climate change and the environment. And what I like to say is that we will not be able to solve the climate crisis without world federalism. To think that an international treaty that has no power is going to solve the climate crisis, to me, that is utopian and impossible. And so I say, you know, yeah, that's sort of my argument, is that if you care about these issues, if you care about inequality and war and nuclear weapons and maybe going to space, then we need a democratic world federation. And so I hope that answers your question. We have a whole frequently asked questions on our website that should provide you with some help maybe in answering those. I'll link them in the chat here. We've tried to provide really good responses to lots of common questions there. And I'll stop there.
Thank you, sir. I got the answer.
Cool. Thank you. Good luck. Good luck. It's not easy. So really good luck with what you're doing. And if you learn anything from what you do, from talking to people about it, share it. That's what our Discord server is for, is to share the best practices and to learn from each other, because we're all still learning here, and there's no right answer. So if you feel free to share your experiences, and there will be other people who want to talk to you about it as well. There was a question in the chat. Yeah.
I was just asking if there are any further questions.
There was one that said, "Can you tell us a little bit about yourselves?" I don't know, Omkaar, would you like to start with that?
Surely I would. So I'm Omkaar Pattanayak. I'm a grade 11 humanities student from Kolkata, India. And among my interests are MUN, debating, and writing and public speaking, and so on. I'm the current Interim Secretary General and founder of the Global Federal League. So nice to have all of you here.
And I'll follow up and say my name's Eston, and I'm originally from Seattle in the United States, but now I live in Berlin, Germany, and I'm the president of the Young World Federalists, and I've been involved in the movement for almost a year, but a little less, maybe 9 or 10 months. Yeah.
I have a follow-up question. Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay, wow. My question is pretty silly, and the fact that I searched it in Google, but I did not receive any satisfying answers, so you would probably help me with that. My question is, what is the difference between World Federalism and World Parliament and the United Nations? Because as you said earlier, United Nations represents the nations, but when it comes to the World Federation, it will also represent the citizens' ideology. But don't you think that adding all the citizens into the decision-making process will make it chaotic enough? Your thoughts on that?
That's an excellent question. Omkaar, would you like to answer? Do you have thoughts? I know
Yes,
I do. But...
Okay, so what I would like to say is World Parliament, it's basically synonymous to World Federalism to a large extent. It falls in our agenda. Coming to United Nations is a world confederacy, if we put it that way. So it is not really efficient enough to take decisions at an international level. We can have a look at climate change. There are so many protocols and conventions regarding climate change, but we are seeing how many of them are getting implemented. Let's have a look at the current situation, the amount of politics that's being played out, the amount of jingoism that's being exposed. So this is what is really the demerit of having a weak international organization which is dealing in these things. Hence, what we propose is we want a strong international organization at the top, which would not directly take away authority from all the lower levels of the government. Autonomy would be maintained, but it would take decisions which are international in nature and which should be addressed by a world government. Coming to your question about people at the end of the day, people are the basic units of a government or basic units of a society. So they need to administer themselves in some way or the other. So they can elect representatives or get elected themselves to the world parliament. They can represent their community, their neighborhoods, their societies. They can address the problems they're facing. So this is basically what's happening in places like India and diverse countries like India and the US and so on. I would like to add one example out here. People say India is a continent in disguise. We have so many languages, we have so many cultures, we have so many communities, right? So this can be compared to a world federation. All of them, they're living under one particular central government. All the communities, they are being heard out. They're given an opportunity to present their views, present their opinions. Every person is given equal representation, at least on paper, at least legally, that person is entitled to equal representation. This is what we want on a larger scale. So I hope that answers your question.
Pretty satisfied to 90%. Okay, your thoughts? Maybe the 10% void can be filled.
I'm sorry. Would you like me to answer, or is that?
Yes, your thoughts on
I
it,
didn't
because
get
it's a
that.
very
Okay.
controversial sort of topic.
Yeah, it is. I think Omkaar did a great job. I wouldn't have that much to add. I would probably just be repeating what he said. But yeah, I mean, the UN, I think the core of maybe the part I'd like to focus on is what you said about it's kind of an inherent critique of democracy as a whole, not just global democracy, but democracy within countries, is that it's messy and chaotic, and having everybody's viewpoints on the table, it gets very complicated, and it's hard to manage. And yeah, I mean, that's democracy is messy and chaotic. However, as Omkaar said, I mean, people do have a right to self-government and to self-governance. And then there's institutions that can be in place to keep things stable. And so we think about two chambers of democracy. So an upper house, maybe the General Assembly that represents the nations of the world remains, and a world parliament as a lower house would represent the people of the world, or humanity as a whole. And then you can think about world courts like the International Court of Justice, if that was strengthened. And then an executive that could be a council or a prime minister or things like that. So there's ways to, and then you have checks and balances between the different branches of government to maintain stability and to combat corruption and things like that. So there's many, as Omkaar said, there's many examples of federalist governance. Many countries are federations: Germany, the United States, India, I mean, Russia. I mean, many countries are federations. So I think taking a look at what's best about each of these current models and designing one that should work for the world, and then also remembering that there will be no perfect system, and we should never stop making the system better. So consistent reviews and reflections of the World Federation will be necessary, I believe. So every 5 years, there should be let's sit down and look at it. How is it working? Are the people represented? This sort of thing. Because I'm from the US, and there's not enough of that going on, and the democracy is very old and hasn't been changed in a long time, and it's kind of a broken democracy. So we need to always be fixing our democracies and updating them with the times, I believe. So I hope that maybe answers your question a little bit.
Thank you for answering the question. One more question that I have in my mind. I may be eating a lot of time, but this is important. When it comes to organizations like these, they have financial contributors. Like the United Nations has this major financial financial contributor to the UN. So if there's a World Federation, it is sort of inevitable for the World Federation to come into this world. So how will this funding and majestic funding take place? Because there will be one dominant capitalist model that will actually submerge the whole World Federation. It can definitely happen since we live in this crony capitalist world. I'm done with my question.
Yeah, Omkaar, would you like to? Yeah, thank you. Omkaar, do you have an answer?
Okay, so yes, this is a good question, I would like to say. So currently, that is going on. It's currently happening in the United Nations. We can have a look at the big dollar and we can have a look at the dollar and big stick diplomacy that's going on. So the thing is, what world federalism as a idea, as a vision, it looks for is we want every person to be represented. As I said in my presentation, from a tiny poverty-ridden African nation to the gargantuan empires of North America and Asia, all need to have equal representation in a world federation. So that is something all of us we are currently working on as organizations involved in the movement, academicians and various intellectuals. They're currently working on this. So we can basically have an ombudsman. These are my suggestions. We can basically have an ombudsman at the center who will manage these things. We can have intercontinental councils which will review the situation. So we can have a council for Asia, just like we have the European Union. We can have an Asian Union, a North American Union, or a South American Union, an African Union. we can strengthen those, and then according to the GDP and percentage of growth, we can fix the how the countries will contribute to the world government. So this is the everything. It comes back to the same thing. Why is big stick diplomacy and dollar diplomacy going on? Why is this sort of expansionism going on? Because there is not a world federation. Because there's not a government which can deal with these things, right? So if we want to stop this era of crony capitalism, we need to bring in world federalism. This is my opinion.
Yeah, I would add that there's many companies in the world, like multinational companies, that use tax havens and don't pay any taxes. I'm from Seattle, which is the headquarters of Amazon, and they don't pay any taxes in my city or even to my government, my national government. So, Omkaar, I'm gonna mute him. Yeah, so also taxing the companies around the world, the multinational companies that basically use the nation state system to avoid paying taxes and make all of their profits in one country, but then hide their profits in other countries or tax havens. That needs to be stopped. And so I think it's a great question to think about, the contributions from national governments. But in my opinion, and this is not really the opinion of Young World Federalists, we don't really have too much economic policy. We really just believe in democratic world federation. But in my opinion, we could tax the companies, the multinational companies, and ideally build like a global welfare state to protect humanity and really bring in the goals of the Sustainable Development Goals, make those a reality by paying for them, by taxing the multinational corporations. And that's just my own personal wish for world federalism.
Thank you so much for answering my question. One more thing I would like to announce, that in this sort of gathering, we are all knowledgeable. We know about what federalism means. But when it comes to a country like India, we definitely have literary gaps, and a lot of countries have it. Those do not have access to technology. So will there be a chance that Omkaar and Sir Eston will be joining for us for a school webinar, because schools are these primary institutions where these sort of knowledge should be spread rather than textual knowledge. So if there's an invitation from my side to organize a webinar for such a topic, will you be there? Oh, an open invitation.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We would love to be there.
Because as soon as this movement progresses, we need a lot of people. So school is a very good start for me.
Exactly. And we have one of the organizations, the World Service Authority. They have a whole platform for World Citizen Clubs. They have a whole website. It's not a very big website, but it has resources to start World Citizen Clubs. It's mostly focused on the U.S. right now, but I mean, these resources work anywhere. And so I'll put this in the chat. I think the World Citizen Clubs in schools around the world is one of the great ways to get the people to get volunteers and to share the information. So there's a link to the website in the chat.
Yes, definitely, because talking to a bunch of youth, which is, look at the numbers here, it's hardly like 10 people. So looking at a conference where 50 people and 60 people are there who are just conversing and talking such a sensitive issue is much more valuable than sitting on a screen which is utterly blank and done.
Yeah, I completely agree. And we need leaders like Omkaar and maybe yourself to really take that forward. So I commit a lot of time to Young World Federalists, and there's too few of us. So we really need people to dedicate themselves to the cause and do the hard and sometimes boring work of organizing on the ground, planning events, printing materials, hanging posters, giving out brochures. All of these things are critical, and we need volunteers to help us with that.
Can you just drop your Instagram ID? There's a contact information?
Yeah.
I have Omkar's,
for the Young World
for the invitation. I want yours and a lot of other young fighters.
My personal. Yeah, here
I'm gonna amplify. I'm not going to start another organization
Perfect.
and be Omkar's competitor. I'm just going to amplify it in schools.
Cool. There's a lot of information there. The link tree on the top, find us online, has all the links to all of our social media and stuff. Okay, and thank you very much. There was one question in the chat to talk about upcoming webinars by you or similar organizations. I think we're trying to plan one with the Young European Federalists on the 16th to talk about, and another organizer in Kenya to talk about like East African federalism and European federalism. However, the Young European Federalists have water damage in their offices, so I'm not certain that will. They have like kind of an emergency in their offices, so I'm not certain that it will actually happen. But that was one thing that's supposed to be planned. I would encourage you, if you want to stay updated on the Young World Federalists and all of our events, then yeah, just click click those links in the chat. Follow us on social media. We have a newsletter. And then we constantly are sharing information. Our Discord server, Discord is not a very popular platform, but we use it to organize ourselves and communicate with our supporters. So it's a great, if you are interested, you can join our community forum on Discord, and you'll stay really updated on everything and even get involved, because that's where we do most of our work, is in Discord. It's kind of like Slack or Microsoft Teams, if you're familiar, but more social media. But yeah. I don't know, Omkaar, is there any, maybe you should also talk about the ways that people can get involved for the Global Federal League.
Okay, so
And then we
the Global Federal League, it's currently all the links and everything is out. So I would be uploading the same in the general forum group. And along with this video, all the links are going to be there. So you can visit our YouTube channel and all our social media handles. All the links are out there. Currently, we are working on an agreement with the Young World Federalists. So post that agreement, we would be becoming their associate chapters in India and Pakistan. So you can join us if you stay in these countries, or even if you don't stay, it's a silver lining of the cloud due to the COVID-19 pandemic. So it does not really matter which part of the world you stay in. So we would love to have you with us, and we are open to consultants and volunteers. We will be having our presidential elections very soon, so you can stay updated with that. We would be putting all the campaign videos and manifestos and speeches on our YouTube channel, so that's there. So our grievance cell in charge Shams has uploaded the links. You can access any of these, and you can stay updated. We had a webinar on Sunday, basically explaining what the GFL is all about. So there also we have discussed all these things, and that's it. So from my part, I would like to thank the Young World Federalists for like making this webinar possible, and especially Mr. McKeague for being patient all the while through the network fluctuations, through the miscreants and the occasional disturbances, and then addressing all of our queries. So any further queries from your side?
No, I'm excellent, and I thank you very much, Omkaar, and I thank everybody for participating and the great questions from the audience, and I look forward to talking with you all more, and yeah, and thank you very much. Okay, so I'll end the call now, and I thank you all again for coming.
Thank you, everyone.
Goodbye.
Have a nice day ahead.